All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. So today's topic is how to use data to create relevant content. I know a very relevant concept and topic to cover these days, so we're excited for that. Before we get started though, I wanted to let you know about our session after this one. The next one will be on August 4th, and this is a very hot topic. So you have member engagement scores. What do you do with them? This is something that, we get requests about all the time, lots of questions. So Greg and Bill are going to take us through, their advice and tips and tricks on what to do with your member engagement scores. As soon as I'm done with these intros, I'll throw that registration link in the chat so you can get signed up for that early. All right, and now to introduce our hosts. You already know what they did for their first jobs, a little bit more about them. Bill Conforti is our SVP of Strategy and Solutions at Association Analytics. He's got more than 20 years of experience with software products and services. And then we have Greg, who's our VP of Sales, and he has more than 15 years experience working with associations and companies that work with associations. So lots of great experience, and I will turn it over to Greg now to get us started.
Awesome, fantastic. I'm excited about that engagement session. We've been talking so much about how to calculate an engagement score. We're finally getting to the good stuff. It's like, well, now we have the score, what do we do with it? So Bill and I are excited to present that as our next session. This session though, what are we doing this session? So we're gonna do some polls and surveys. We love to ask you questions. We love to get your feedback both in the chat and formally. Keep in mind, we use that feedback throughout our presentations and to plan our sessions. So that's always important. We're going to talk about relevancy in a couple ways. How do we collect the data to align to relevancy? What does it even mean to be relevant? What are the different ways content can be relevant for people and why you should be doing that? We're going to show you some live examples of relevancy in the software today. We're going to be looking at learning systems. How do we connect our learning content to relevancy, our sales data? We're going to be looking at all that fun sort of stuff. And then we're going to have some feedback about that, about how do we really succeed with relevancy. It's not just this is relevant for my members. We're going to talk about different ways that relevancy can apply from a marketing standpoint, a product creation standpoint, a sunsetting standpoint. We're going to cover all those concepts today. Obviously, we'll do some summarization and some key takeaways at the end. Depending on how chatty you are, we will engage with you until the bitter end.
Quick random sidebar. Just curious, do you all say relevancy or do you say relevance? So I remember we were rehearsing this and Greg was saying relevance. I was like, that doesn't sound right. And I looked it up and both are correct. But I was just curious to know if you say relevancy or relevance. Sorry.
I didn't even know. I wouldn't have known if you asked me.
Yeah, it just occurred to me right now. I mean, I looked it up after, but anyway. The grammar police. Sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to police. It was just a curiosity.
Good stuff. No. All right. Next slide.
I see I'm falling down on my slide advancing responsibilities.
So who is Association Analytics? We always throw this slide in for the YouTubers and the ones who are following up with us and are like, who are these people talking with us? So we are Association Analytics. We're a company based out of Arlington, Virginia, that is exclusively focused, as the name says it, on helping associations benefit from their analytics. Our core mission is to help you pull all that data in from your disparate systems, to massage that data and make sense of it, and ultimately visualize that data so you can make decisions with it. And today, the decision we're talking about is relevancy related to content, both in the creation of that content, the sales, the marketing of that content. That's what we're talking about today. That's an outcome of doing analytics, is the ability to identify relevancy without having to jump through all the Excel spreadsheet and pivot table hoops in the world.
All right. So yeah, so content is a big concern, and one of the challenges that we run into all the time, right, is how do we know what to produce and how to produce it, essentially. So so first poll question is, what types of content does your association produce, right? So in this case, we're talking about media, right? So you do blogs, do you do white papers, practice guides, things like that. So in this case, we're going to check all of the things that apply.
I can finally participate.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
We create video content, we do. All right, let's take a look. Maybe shorted you a little bit on the time, considering there's a lot of choices there, but okay.
There's one person out there who refuses to do webinars. I love it.
I mean, that's way more webinars than I would think. A lot of blogs.
50% videos. That's exciting.
A lot of newsletters. Yeah. Even 28% podcasts. I think that's a little bit higher than I would have expected. So, but point is we're doing. There's a lot of representation, right? So there's a lot of content that's being produced across a lot of different types of media, and so, but a lot of us are small staff associations, right? And even the ones that are big, we still have to be mindful about how we're using those resources. We have to be smart about where we focus those efforts and on what provides real value to members. So how do we make those type of decisions? Brings us to our next question, which is how do you decide which content to produce and which ones to prioritize? So there's a couple different things here. We've seen a lot of associations that do it by department, right? They just say each department is kind of responsible for their own. Maybe the board or executive leadership decides. Some do some analysis of the website. They do surveys, right? All kinds of ways. So check all that apply. For how do you decide how to prioritize your content. Okay, and maybe some of you don't know, I guess, right? Okay, let's take a look. Yeah, marketing, Marcom determines everything. Okay, so about half said each department creates their own. Also about half, 55%, said they use surveys, and another 55% professional judgment and experience. A few, only 3% don't know. And eight say that they're some other way, right? They're telling us about that in the chat. So I think nothing too surprising here. Any big surprises for you, Greg?
The number of associations doing video and podcast was surprising. Certainly there. And I think to Alan's point here, it's small staff, it's who's passionate about it. If you're volunteering to do it, great, go create that content for us. But I think that falls back into our limited capacity. There's only so many of us. There's only so much time. If we're going to create content and we're going to publish it through a medium, how do we understand the success of those publications? Are we creating content that no one watches, or are we creating rich content that has benefits not only today but long-term benefits for our members?
Yeah, member generated. That's not something we're going to touch on a lot today, but that's actually really a really good point. Thanks for that. And I wouldn't be shocked if you see that in a future webinar. So that's really a really smart thing to do as well. But like Greg was saying, even if you're small and even if you volunteer to create that, there's still opportunity costs, for any content that you do create. It's something else obviously that you could be doing that you're not. So again, it's an important topic. This is actually some data from, well, we've asked this question previously, right? To what extent does your association use data to inform decisions? It's a major part, content's a major part of the value proposition, a big piece of overall engagement for all of us. And yes, it's kind of consistent with what we see here, but more than 80% are using data at least some of the time to inform their content decisions. And one of the other interesting things in this poll was that it was pretty equally split among large and small. So even the small associations were doing it as often as the larger ones. So what all these associations have in common, the ones that are doing it best, they have some kind of framework for how they're leveraging content. So a couple things.
Second, Bill, I have to say this. Kudos to Bill on this. He's using Acumen successfully. We did that poll a long time ago, but we put it inside of Acumen, so we had the answers at our fingertips. When this came up, we didn't have to go digging in our survey tool to find the answer. It was right there for us. Can't have a better example of data aggregation, putting it in the same place every time, using it similar ways. It just worked for us right there. That was a perfect example.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Cool. So the framework would look something like this. So first, we have to collect the data. We have to be careful and deliberate and as comprehensive as possible in how we do that. We have to organize it in a way that allows us to access that data fast, maybe to search it, but certainly to analyze it in meaningful ways. And ideally, we're going to be able to integrate that data. So it lives all over the association and it's valuable, but it's going to be limited value if we can't at least get the critical data into some central location. It's always going to be best if we can visualize it. I mean, spreadsheets are okay, but it's going to be much more accessible to the average business staff if you can put it in visual form. And then that's going to allow us to analyze and to act, right? So with the visualized data, we'll be able to make better decisions, and make those decisions faster. So Greg, how are we going to collect all of that data that we're going to need to do this?
Every way we can. So when we collect data, we want to think about the standard touch points asking. So here I've logged in and I can update my profile within the member portal. But at the same time, I get emails from my associations just asking me what sort of things I like. I really like this example because they're not asking me to fill out a 20-page survey. They're just asking me one specific question. What industry topic am I interested in? I clicked on the button. A few days later, a relevant article arrived in my inbox. No surprise. It was directly connected to that. We're going to talk about those direct connections, but also observe what I'm doing in a number of ways. It may not seem like observing, but purchases are a way to observe what members are engaging in. As long as we've got that taxonomy and we're creating a great way to store that. Observe in other ways. We talked about member generated content. What am I talking about in the community? What content do I like or post on? Who am I talking to inside the online community? And then obviously building all of that centralized into one dashboard to understand how am I engaging with you on a holistic approach? What mediums do I engage with? What content do I engage with? What individuals do I engage with? All of this is how we're going to collect the data. But if you've noticed, not all this data fits into nice round boxes. So we're going to have to massage it a little bit to make it fit in some of our boxes. And that's where we get to our next stage in the framework.
Okay, so organize, right? So here we're really talking about a taxonomy. If you don't have a taxonomy, it's something that I recommend that you look into as soon as you can, right? So it's commonly going to start with your website and your web content, but you want to apply it across all across your association, right? So it's really a method of tagging and of classifying your content. Just real quick in the chat, if anyone has what they would consider to be a mature taxonomy that's used across their association, we'd love to hear from you about that. It's going to allow you to do a couple things. For our purposes, the most important one is analyzing performance, right? So if you think about, say, your product hierarchy or your events hierarchy, you want to be able to look at specific categories and types of events or content to assess their performance relative to others. And then likewise, you want to be able to assess that performance with different segments of your audience as well, right? So you can also target and personalize based on those tags in that taxonomy. It's going to make it easier to find and to search things on your website and other places where members access content. So you can have the best content in the world. If the users can't find, or if it's difficult, then they're not going to engage with it. And then of course your overall navigation. That's mostly a website thing. We also have to integrate.
Wait a minute.
Yep.
This has to be organizational-wide taxonomy. Each department can't pick their own.
Now we want to be consistent about it. The one thing that I say often is that when we interact with when we purchase, when we interact with the community, any kind of touch point that a member or a customer has with the association, it should be telling you very specific things about my preferences and about my interests, but it's only going to do that if you have the same, the same taxonomy applied to your products and services consistently, right? So that that my interest that I express in one area is going to be applicable to another. Good question, though.
What about you showed a taxonomy there that has like 3 different levels. Is 3 a good starting point? Should I have 10 different levels of taxonomy? How deep should I go there?
Yes, that's a great question. I mean, 10 is probably overkill for sure. 3, 4, 5, something like that is probably right around the sweet spot. I mean, we see some customers that are maybe in the, for medical or scientific or something where we're talking about a taxonomy for abstract submittals, and with something that's really complex, you might have many layers, but for the most part, 3 or 4 layers is probably going to be enough, at least to get started. I mean, taxonomy can be expanded over time as long as you do it consistently.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Okay, wait, and then integrate. Just really quick, this is we've seen this one a lot, but the point is that the data to inform these content decisions is comprehensive. It lives all over the association, and we need to have a reliable way to integrate that. Our AMS transactions, emails, website clicks, learning, all those kinds of things, right? And so
about lack of integration. Pre-pandemic, I was talking to an association, won't name any names. They have a very large trade show, and they told me that they pay their general service contractor $100,000 a year to do surveys of their attendees when they leave the trade show. They ask them all these questions, they interview them, they fill out forms, $100,000 to do this survey. And I said, what do you do with that data after you collect it? And they sort of looked at me like I was speaking another language. I said, well, it's in that PowerPoint they showed us at the end of the meet. We showed everybody the PowerPoint with the answers. I was like, but do you do anything with it next year? And they were like, what do you mean? I was like, well, how do you consistently approach the survey? Are you looking at trends over time? Nope. Next year, when you go to plan your event, are you using that survey? Nope. So here we've got the idea, we're collecting all this relevant data on our attendees and what they liked and what they didn't like and their preferences. But if we fail to retain that data and we fail to integrate that data into a repository, the insights are lost. If I wasn't in that meeting or I don't remember what happened a year ago, that data is not valuable for me at all. So I think regardless of how much data we're collecting or what taxonomy we've set up, if we're not keeping that data and using that data, we're missing out on a huge opportunity there. The one thing I like about our framework is each one of these steps is critical. If you miss one of the steps, the whole sort of thing falls apart, it collapses, it doesn't work without everything.
Awesome. Great. So then, so Greg's going to take us through the last few stages of that framework, which are all kind of related, and we're starting with visualization.
Thanks, Bill.
All right.
Can you stop sharing for me?
I sure can.
All right, I've got Acumen up here, our web-based analytics platform. If you remember from last time, it's a web-based platform where you can access all of your data in one spot. The handy part about this is everything I need to know about my organization is all collected in one place. We're going to talk about these taxonomies and relevancy in a couple ways. The first place I want to start is learning. So my association offers a lot of courses. Probably like your organization, we add more courses all the time. And I sort of wonder, like, do we have too many courses? Is the content relevant for our members? When I send out a marketing email to my members about that next course, am I promoting a relevant course? Or am I just promoting, here's our catalog, go figure out what you want? So in learning, we need to categorize our courses. So this is one of the primary ways we're going to start using that taxonomy. And my courses, I'm categorizing them by the course category itself. And I've got this internal code system that makes sense to our association. I've got things like course topics. Is this related to development, analytics? Is this management? I've got modalities as well. Is this on-site? Is this self-study? We may want to look at regions or geographies where these courses are being consumed. Are they taken inside the US and Canada? Are these internationally consumed? And we want to start looking at how the taxonomy of our courses aligns to the taxonomy of our course participants. So this is where my friend the drill through is going to come in. We sell a lot of these development classes. Of the development classes I sell, some of them aren't relevant to my catalog at all, and some of them are highly relevant. And then we want to look further into this and say, okay, when we do sell these development classes, how does the class align with the people? So now we're looking at our other taxonomy. And this is where that mapping we're going to talk about really comes in handy. Because first up, I look at a trend here, and it looks like in 2017, I sold a lot of learning, but we've been going downhill from since then. We're going to chalk that up to some interesting data. Let's just circle in on this year. So if I'm selling this type of course, a development course, who is this course relevant for? And this is where my taxonomy needs to serve my association. This content might be relevant to people, and we might want to look at how this content is relevant based on job function, title, member type, how long they've been a member, if they're certified or not certified. But this content might be relevant for organizations. I was talking to an association earlier, and they allow their members to resell their content to their constituents. So here we might want to tie this to an organizational type. And I specifically noticed that this content is highly relevant to these small businesses. It blows everything else out of the water. So now we're starting to identify, yeah, there's a difference here where this one category is outperforming the others. We're going to say this is highly relevant to them. But then if I look at the learner by job function, I don't necessarily distinguish any significance and relevancy here. Sure, there's a little bit higher on this one and a little bit lower on this one, but it seems pretty even across the board. So here is where I, as the human, start interpreting the data. And I say, you know, we notice that these types of courses are highly relevant for these types of organizations, but equally relevant based on job level across the board. So what I want to then do is say, well, if we're going to dig deeper in, tell me more about those organizations that are taking our content. Tell me the details, the breakdown of the organizations. So this is a perfect example of, we've collected the data, we've created those taxonomies, and we're aligning them so we can connect one taxonomy of our products with another taxonomy of the types of individuals or organizations that engage in those products. Now, if we can go one direction, wouldn't it be handy if we can go the other? So this is where we might want to start with a learner breakdown, and we might want to start looking at who on average takes our courses. What are the types of organizations that engage in our content? And here in 2018, we can see that that small business group engages in a lot of our content. Was there a little confirmation bias there where we were looking at it and they buy a lot of content? Or if we go backwards, can we give you the same level of detail? So now we want to drill through and say, okay, of these types of organizations, what are the types of courses they take? How can we go back and figure out if both those things align in each way? Perfect example of how to do that. Now, we went to learning to get that data, but obviously if we want to see relevance and products, we can easily jump right into sales and get all that data as well. So similarly, we can go to sales over time by year. You can see my organization makes a lot of money from events. It also makes a lot of money from learning. So we want to understand, of this $500,000, who typically buys this content, who typically engages in this. And this is where we might want to start doing product breakdowns or individual breakdowns. We might want to look for top customers or top individuals, top organizations who purchase this. So let's go with that demographic breakdown. If you're going to buy a course, tell me the job function you have. Are you international or US? Is there a specific level here that really applies? And we might want to start combining these things to get down to details as well. So I might want to say, okay, when we sell courses to the staff, it looks like they're buying a lot of developer courses. I might want to know, tell me the product breakdown they're purchasing. So what we now know is individuals who are staff level at developer functionality, when they buy learning from us, these are the courses they typically buy. If we're going to send out an email, we should promote it to these courses to these types of people. The flip side of that is we might want to know who typically buys it. So this could be something where we're going to drill through again, and we're going to say, give me the individual customers who on a regular basis buy these courses. Or we might want to say, give me the organizations who buy these courses. So the first way I walk through this is, we started with our sales and we tied them into people. Then we went back and went to our people and tied them into sales. So we can do that here as well. If we want to look at our demographic breakdown, all of the types of people we engage with on a regular basis, what type of content is really relevant to our data scientists? And here I might drill through to the product breakdown. And I might say, okay, when data scientists engage with us, how do we track that? What do? They go to our conference, they sign up as members, they purchase these products from us, they do these specific things. We can tie all that together in both directions. Last piece I want to cover today is this idea of an overlap. And an overlap is a really good way to get to relevancy. If people like Bill worked at hotels and I have a job opening for a hotel, I should go find people like Bill. This is a great way to do this. So our event every year gets a lot of people who come. So here I can go and say events. So sorry about that. This is what happens when I load it beforehand. All right. So what we want to do is we want to say, of all the people who went to our event, what else did they do with us? So we're going to go here to product type, and I'm going to say events. So when someone attends our event, and we're going to be specific about it, we're going to say the annual conference, and we'll be even more specific. We'll say this year's annual conference. If people went to this year's annual conference, what else did they do from us? And here my taxonomy is going to say under learning, they took courses. And we can see that it's pretty relevant. A lot of people who went to my conference also engaged in learning. So here's where we want to take that action, which is all important. And what I want to do is I want to understand that of all the people who went to my annual conference, 3,000 of them bought this course from us, this Acumen course. That represented $210,000. But in theory, I'm leaving $400,000 on the table because these 7,000 people, it's probably relevant for them as well. We should probably market this content to them. So my example of taking action is I'm going to say individuals who purchased Acumen, but not the annual conference. I'm going to say, let's go ahead and invite them. So let's export this data. Let's fire them off a very targeted email, encouraging them to do the second thing, because a lot of people like them did that first thing. We assume that that's relevant for them, kind of guilty by association of their association.
Great. Yeah, great. Great. And one comment I would make about all that is we looked at, learning content and things related to your events. I mean, this also applies to basically all the other types that we talked about, right? It's your blog posts here, things that are free. It's content on your website. There's practice guides and other things where you're keeping track of content downloads and that sort of thing as well. Okay, and so it's just a couple of quick, conceptual, comments about these types of decisions. So they're kind of like macro and micro level decisions, right? So at the highest level, at the macro level, we're looking across populations, across segments, maybe in some cases across all of our customers, all of our members and customers, and we're trying to decide like what types of content should the association invest in, right? So we have all of these people over here, we have all of these types of content, and broadly speaking, we have to align our content with the members and the customers that we're trying to serve. And it seems like people on this call, we're already doing a pretty good job of that. Now, taking that to the next level, we know that we're going to write those white papers, those blogs, podcasts, maybe those videos more and more. But what should be the topics and the subjects that should be emphasized in those videos and those other types of content? We want to maximize the value. We want to increase conversions. We want to improve engagement and all of that, right? So we know that the value proposition for different individuals and different types of members can vary. So we want to be aware of this, and we want to keep the audience in mind, when we're creating that content, right? So, some of these, so these red ones here are interested in these learning courses or these books and these podcasts and these white papers, right? And the blue ones are maybe interested in things that are slightly different, right? So those are another example of the macro level decisions that we have to make. And then ultimately, we talk a lot about personalization. We've done webinars before about kind of getting down to a segment of one, basically. But ultimately, we do want to provide the right content, and maybe even adding the element of time, the right content at the right time to those individuals, right? On our website, in our community, on the mobile app, et cetera. So in marketing, we would call this a micro conversion, or maybe we'd look at it as a micro engagement. But then in the aggregate, when we look at this sort of decision across all of our business areas, all of those different media types, and across a lot of individuals, this is ultimately how we're going to build our content strategy. All right.
Can I jump in for 1 second, Bill? I want to talk about this idea of relevant for one versus relevant for everyone in our association, and this idea of shrinking that lens and getting to a smaller group of relevancy over time. When I think about this, I think about sort of relevant for our association, and we're going to be a nursing association. If we're a nursing association, we're not going to create content about precast concrete. It's just not relevant for our members, right? We understand that everybody within our member circle, content around nursing is relevant for them. But then we start creating that taxonomy and we start analyzing data and we start realizing, well, within everybody who's a nurse, there are segments of nurses, right? And we start to think about how our taxonomy works. We start to think about there's really big segments, people who attend our conference, and there's smaller segments, people who are certified, people who volunteer, people who engage at this high level. And we want to start understanding how the relevancy of content is related to those people, all the way down to that smallest circle, which is what is relevant for this one individual person. And I think we're being successful as long as we're continuing to shrink that lens, as long as we're continuing to say, how do I look for a relevant group and identify relevant content to them, as long as we're not saying, well, they're nurses, everybody should see it, right? As long as we're looking at all of our content with that lens of, how do I better target this to the right person, all the way down to that conversion level where Bill went to the website and downloaded the white paper. Well, Bill should come to our event because we're talking about it. It's relevant for Bill. We want to be able to do those one-to-one relationships at the end of the day. But I think as associations, our primary job with data is to identify, how can we make those circles smaller? How can we make them more accurate? How can we target people within those circles better? And how can we create content to serve those members that's relevant to them? If we can use this framework, we can shrink those circles over time and get to the right person with the right message.
Yeah. Okay, so in our survey, we talked about how many of us, still more than half of people on the call, of associations on the call, are making content decisions based on professional judgment. A lot of them are delegating that to the specific business areas. And you might think that we're in the business of saying, no, that's wrong, you should never do that. Not the case, right? So we've started years ago to use the term data informed in lieu of data driven, which is quite popular. And there's a nuance there, right? Which is that you want the data to augment your wisdom, right, and your domain expertise, your insights, rather than just to sort of blindly follow what the data would tell you to do. And the reason for that is, as associations, a big part of our value proposition is thought leaders, right? So we need to innovate, we need to focus on thought leadership, and all of those answers are not necessarily available just by asking members what they want, and maybe even from the patterns and the things that they've done before, the things that we can observe. So some of it, just for example, and Greg's talked about this before, if we had asked, a lot of members and a lot of customers about their interest in virtual events, maybe it wouldn't have been so big, right? Going back a couple of years. So how many associations had really heavily invested in virtual events prior to COVID? Answer is not that many. Because and the data wouldn't necessarily have suggested that they should, but looking at industry trends, maybe doing some risk management and risk mitigation type strategies, that's something that might have led them to do that. And lastly, I would say test and learn, which is, it basically means that some types of new content are really labor intensive and it requires a lot of resources, and you have to be super careful about that. But others, it is really possible to experiment, test out new pieces of content, test out new products and services. If they resonate, awesome. If they don't, then you have the data available, to make the decision to quickly move away from that and focus your resources somewhere else. So.
Bill, I was monitoring the chat here on that last slide, and Bruce here brought up an interesting point about sharing relevant data with industry partners, corporate sponsors, and allowing them to use that. I think that's a great insight. If we can identify that this content is relevant to our members and corporate sponsors aren't providing that content, they don't have products and services that align with that, they're not creating thought leadership, we're missing an opportunity. This is one of those areas where not only do we want to collect the data, maybe we add another item to our framework where we share the data. What is relevant for our members, share that data out with the industry partners, with thought leaders, so they can leverage that relevancy as well. If I'm going to create a new product or service, I'm going to create a company that benefits the members. What type of product and service are they interested in? And if I know that there's a lot of relevancy out there, maybe I'll invest in innovating my product or providing content to the members at no cost about that. And it could benefit everybody in the industry. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, it really is. And some of our customers are doing that already, and some of the associations that we talk to, not only using the data to decide what types of content to produce, but often, the data itself is a big part of the content that they offer, right? So it's aggregating, industry data and providing that out to their their members, their larger customers, to their industry as thought leadership. And in some cases, it's even things that can be monetized. So that may be also another topic that we could look at on a future how to provide data-centric content to members, how to monetize that. So if that's something that's interesting to you, let us know in the survey after the chat today. So with that, I'm going to wrap us up here with key takeaways. Ask and observe. So this is about how we collect, right? Sometimes it's just easy just to ask, what members want. We can observe a lot about what they do want from their transactions, but again, remember that this is that's not everything, right? You need to augment that with your own experience, with the wisdom and collective experience of your staff. Taxonomy has to be association wide, and that's something that's really important. It's gonna be difficult to get value out of any of this if you don't have that taxonomy, or at least some rudimentary form of it in place. Integrate the data, visualize it if you can, and really experiment, test and learn. So once you have these other things in place, it's going to give you the tools to evaluate performance of any content that you put out there, and be able to make those decisions fast and with confidence. You can so you can change directions if needed. All right. Anything to add to those, Greg?
I think those are some good takeaways. No.
All right.
And I didn't see any other questions in the questions. I saw a bunch of chat, but nothing question-wise.
All right. Yeah. So as we'll talk about the next section here. If anyone does have questions, we're happy to hang around a little bit for discussion. But we have a new session coming up. It's going to be August 4th, 3 p.m. Katrina mentioned this. We're going to talk about engagement, not about how to score engagement, right? We've talked about that before, but like, do you have the score and what do you do with it? We get a lot of questions on that, and look forward to your feedback and discussion on that. So you can sign up with the link that is just now in the chat. And we would greatly appreciate your participation in a 30-second to 1-minute survey when you leave the webinar. We do pay attention to all of that, and you'll see that feedback in future sessions. All right. So if there's no other questions, thank you so much for your participation, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a few weeks.
Thanks everybody for joining us. Hopefully this content was relevant for you, because we've been listening to what you've all been asking for, and we produce relevant content. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Looking forward to hearing your feedback.